Hey everyone, this is Dan Wynn, and I'm here with Brian Reyes with Tangram Realty. Hey Brian, thank you for joining us here for our conversation.
Hey, thank you for having me, Dan. I'm
Sure,
honored.
sure. Yeah, likewise. We met a while back. You introduced to me by a mutual friend, Amid Bahadori. And we worked on something else, but you did mention, you're in commercial real estate, and from where I stand, for those of you who are listening for the first time, I am a business lawyer here in Orange County, and obviously I work with businesses and business owners, and for those who aren't, in purely online and working on the house, they got to get retail space or warehouse space. And so I wanted to have Brian on the show here and talk a little bit about maybe some of the mistakes people make when trying to look for a property or getting a property, maybe when it's right to purchase a property, and then maybe some things they can do to protect themselves as a tenant, because we never hear the good landlords. We always hear about the bad landlords, right? And so maybe some things that us as tenants can be obviously good tenants, and then get maybe good deals as tenants, whether it's a new lease or maybe renewing. So let's kind of start off at the top. Give us a little bit of background about yourself, how you got into real estate, and then were you always automatically attracted to commercial side? Because I know a lot of people start on the residential side, and what about you, the commercial side?
Yeah, so I mean, residential real estate and commercial real estate, two different animals, apples and oranges. The way, taking a couple steps back, the way I got into commercial real estate specifically is I was actually a financial advisor straight out of college in 2005, and then sold a small practice in 2012, I believe, and jumped into real estate then after. So just through my experience in the investment world, as well as my contacts who were affluent to high net worth individuals who just happen to own businesses, and being a tenant myself, I actually signed 2 office leases and was in the tenant slash business owner side, paying rent to landlords. It was just a natural transition for me. And so that's how I got into tenant representation for commercial real estate and office spaces, retail spaces, industrial spaces. And then naturally through my investment experience, part of my brokerage business does revolve around investments on the commercial side. So not sure if that answers your question, but that's kind of in a nutshell my experience and how I got into it.
Okay, sure. You mentioned that you start off in the financial advising side, and they obviously can both industries can be very lucrative, but aside from being a tenant or becoming a tenant, what kind of took you out of what are some of the triggers that kind of took you out of the financial advising world?
Just some. So I came at a crossroads from a personal position where I had to choose where to take my practice, and just given the circumstances, I was just coming to a conclusion personally that financial planning and that type of work with finance just wasn't. It was lucrative, and I made a good income from it, but I'm being honest, I just didn't enjoy the aspect of people being extremely stressed out when things were good and being even more stressed out when things were bad. Just money is a very, very complicated thing, and I've seen, I've had clients who had divorces, I've had clients who, lost their husband or wife, and then fortunately we were able to plan accordingly and structure things in a way where we were able to preserve what they saved. A lot of the people I worked with were long-time engineers, so, it was nice to see that part of it, but it was just emotionally, I just didn't enjoy it. And I came to, as you get older, as you know, Dan, you start to realize that you maybe got into it because you didn't know any better, and you were just working hard, putting your head down and making good money. But it's not something that you're having a lot of fun with.
Hmm.
And so my clients naturally still are my friends and like me and do business with me on the real estate side.
Hmm.
But just financial planning just wasn't for me.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And as part of your experience as when you were in the financial advising world, and then becoming the tenant, what are some of the things that you learned as a tenant, thinking, okay, hey, I think some of my clients as a tenant rep need to know about this.
um, everyone likes to think they're smarter than they are. And I was absolutely in that boat. I was a junior at the time to 3 senior advisors, and we managed, millions of dollars. We had, I want to say collectively over 60 million in assets under management. So we weren't dumb guys, but, we didn't have representation. We had a bunch of brokers and agents coming into our office, giving us their spiel. And we thought, we know numbers, we know finance, we'll just do it ourselves. Well, long story short, we signed a lease. We signed a 5-year lease, I believe, in 2006-ish. And so what happened
Hmm.
during the downturn. And so we were paying top dollar with 3% increases each and every year when our building started to become more and more vacant.
Hmm.
And so, needless to say, we were paying way more money in rent than we should have. And through that experience, I wholeheartedly believe that as I tell all my clients or prospects, it may not be me who represents you, but find someone who's competent and don't do it on your own, because you essentially, one, are wasting time allocating the resources, whether it be yourself, your time, or your staff. And two, you're not saving any money. On the contrary, you're probably hurting yourself without knowing.
Yeah, and there's kind of like a saying in my industry, it's like, he who represents himself has a fool for a client, right? And so that's kind of that's our mantra in our world. But you talk about self-representation, and I think you talk about costs. So can you dispel some of the myths? Who, if I hire someone like you to represent me, like, do I have to pay you to represent me? Do you get paid by the landlord or on their side?
So traditionally, the way it works, and when I say traditionally, I mean 99% of the time,
Mhm.
it works similar to residential real estate. So any brokers or agents that are involved get paid on the seller's or the landlord side. So if you sell a home, you sell your home, Dan, you're going to pay a commission to your agent, and you're going to allocate a percentage where if your agent doesn't double end it, that agent's going to split the fee with the buyer's agent, right? So in commercial real estate, it's very similar, where if I represent a tenant or an owner user who buys a building, my commission and my fee comes from the sellers or the landlord side that they've already allocated to their agents and their pro forma. We essentially just split the fee.
Okay. So like for like most people, most tenants, in some sense, there's nothing out of pocket for them to have a someone to rep them on one side of the transaction.
Correct. And the reason why I say 99% of the time is because doing this since 2012 now, I have seen instances where I haven't been involved in it, but other brokers that are my colleagues have mentioned that their clients, given where they end up in a building that's just kind of a woody walk-up, mom-and-pop ownership, it's very rare, but the ownership, because they're hurting and they're, a smaller ownership, don't pay commissions.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's very strange,
Yeah.
and it rarely happens. But what ends up happening is, naturally, just like yourself, Dan, if you spend the time and you're adding value, if you're not going to get paid the way you're supposed to get paid, normally your client takes care of you because you've done them a great benefit. But like I said, that rarely happens.
Okay. So I know California is kind of one of the few states that allow dual representation for real estate. And so I think for some people, they go drive around and they see a property, not knowing, they're not familiar with how commercial real estate works and how the agency works. But, what would be some of the advantages of working with a strictly tenant side rep like yourself, rather than, going directly to the listing agent?
Well, so let me bring some color to that question really quickly. During my career as a tenant rep, commercial real estate agent, I actually was recruited by a local boutique firm here in Orange County that was composed of principals that came from Cushman and CBRE, so they formed their own little shop. During that time, I was actually on a team that helped institutional landlords, the project that I was on. So we helped lease about 2 million square feet in A-class office space. So I know exactly 100% how landlords operate on the highest level and how the incentive that we have and the spreadsheets we run off of. So with that said, working with someone like myself who focuses solely on representing the tenant and the tenant only, we have one goal, and that's to serve our client, to serve the tenant. If you go to a Lee & Associates or a CBRE broker that has the listing, a Cushman & Wakefield broker that has the listing, their job is to complete the transaction. But first and foremost, their fiduciary responsibility is to serve their client, which is the landlord, whether it be, your larger landlords like BlackRock or Equity Office or Arden, which no longer is in this marketplace, or whether it's, the couple who was able to amount millions of dollars through their efforts and now own a commercial building. They're going to get the deal done, and they're going to try to, help the tenant out, but they're going to take the landlord's orders, and that's to either give as little TIs as possible, get as much rent as possible, a combination of the two, or make the legal document, and this is where a lot of tenants don't understand that this happens. Rent and tenant improvements and free rent, all the economic points of the deal, that's one aspect of the lease, but just like because you're an attorney, Dan, a lease is a legal contract. So there are a lot of liabilities written into that lease that get put on the tenant rather than it being written more fairly where the landlord isn't benefiting, I would say 80% more in the legal lease contract. That makes sense.
Right. So, yeah, you made some really good, eye-opening points as to what people should know about leases and the obligations of listing agents and property owners. Now, so this is 2020 now, so you've been doing about eight years or so. What would you say are some of the most, maybe say top 3 mistakes that tenants do when in trying to find a property?
They start too late is probably the number one mistake, because we can spend an hour in itself talking about just the nuances of that, but they start too late and end up making quicker decisions rather than really thoughtful decisions, just because as a business owner, your goal is to get the business up and running, right? And so when you make quick decisions, you tend to overlook something, or you sign a lease contract that's not as favorable to you, or you're just quite frankly overpaying, and you just got swindled by the landlord's broker. 2, they don't necessarily understand how the rent's going to work. And what that means is there are 3 types of rent that is common to the marketplace. One is full service gross. The other is triple net. And then the last one's modified gross. Each and every type of rent has a different pay structure. And if you don't necessarily understand how that works, you may sign up for a 3-year lease, a 5-year lease, and be very surprised that you're getting charged more than you expected. And as a startup business, unless you just have a large amount of funding, like the tech industry, you can't afford to make that mistake because it could eat away at your operating costs in the first 2 years, which is essential to starting your business. And the third mistake, I guess this is a plug for me, but just not being represented, trying to do it yourself. Like I said, we were tenants once before. We did it ourselves. We spent hours looking for the office space, and then more hours dealing with the landlord's broker and the landlord's architect to get tenant improvements done. And I don't know about you, Dan, but in your business, I have to imagine that dealing with anything that's office related or location related, that's not how you bring in revenue. Your time is not spent wisely doing that. And unless you're directly in real estate and in commercial real estate brokerage, most of the time, if not 100% of the time, any minute you spend that's not on your core business is hurting you directly and hurting your bottom line. So I wouldn't spend my time and I wouldn't spend my staff's time if I were in these tenant shoes, looking at properties, trying to figure out what's fair and trying to, figure out things that they shouldn't be figuring out, and just have someone that they trust, that's competent, doing it for them.
Yeah, you make up a really good point, and I think it's probably a good business proposition, generally speaking, is, you want to focus on the revenue producing activities. Don't do what you're not an expert at, and leave that to the pros. Now, sometimes we have more time and money, and then we have more money than time, right? But I think real estate is one of those good situations where it's important to hire an expert because you have access to all the databases. You talk to clients like me and says, hey, this is what I'm looking for. And so the client doesn't have to go around driving all around town looking for signs, right, on their own. Experts like yourself do all the heavy lifting and say, hey, here's what fits your parameters. And then let's narrow it down and see which ones are right for you guys.
Absolutely. And if I may add something, a good real estate broker or real estate agent in the commercial world, their job isn't just to find you a building or a space and help you ink the deal in terms of rent. As I tell people and my clients, the reason why they hire me, they're really supposed to be a business consultant because a commercial office space for most tenants, it is a significant cost, and it's a commitment. It's like a marriage, right? You're not just doing it for a month; you're doing it for years. And making sure that works for your business and understanding why it is that you're even getting that space, it's a conversation that most people don't even have internally. For example, a lot of people these days are doing open office spaces, right? Where they're, even attorneys now are, instead of your individual offices, they're moving towards the creative side where it's open and kind of runs like a tech company or an architectural company. And people are doing it because it's cool looking. And, studies show that it makes employees feel good. And it leads to, because employees feel good, it leads to increased activity or productivity. Where I've seen that, I'm actually thinking of attorney office right now. I've seen them do it, and it's just a terrible idea for the way their practice runs. And so it's like, if they had a good broker, which I didn't represent them, it's a client referral, but I didn't represent them. It's just having that conversation. Before you even start looking, you need to understand what it is that you're you're trying to accomplish. And so, I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. And as your tenants and as the people who are listening to this podcast are looking for commercial space, make your agents and your brokers work for you. Don't just let them do the easy work, which is typing something in the MLS, looking for a building, and telling you what the rate is.
Okay. Yeah. So let's kind of go down that road a little bit. And, obviously, commercial agents are more like business consultants asking, maybe even the toughest questions. But when someone is at that point, says, yeah, let's hire a tenant rep, what are some of the other things they should be aware of, or qualities of tenant reps that they should be looking for?
That's a great question. I mean, it's tough for me to answer because I guess I'm biased in where I sit today. But you want someone so there's a balance between someone who has experience and someone who, just isn't going to put in the hours of the real work for you. And what I mean by that is there are people who their name is very, very credible and very, very big in this county. And I won't name the names, but I've earned and I've won the business in a competitive situation because, quite frankly, I know that the way they operate, they're looking for larger tenants. They're going to hand off anything below a certain size to their secretarial positions or their staff support, and it's just not going to be handled in the way that the tenant deserves. So just like financial planning, there's always an agent or always a planner that's a better suit for your requirement, for your situation. And just being able to ask the right questions as to one, how many deals are they working on? What type of businesses do they work with? Why do they work with those type of businesses? What's their core focus? Trying to flush out, okay, are you just trying to do this deal because it's going to help you meet your quotas, especially with the big firms, or are you going to serve me as a tenant, as a client, in the way that I deserve? So I know that's a very, very gray answer, but it's just feeling that they're going to spend the time, and it's a very hard thing to find out, and that's the reason why I'll be the first person to say it. Commercial real estate agents, just like residential real estate agents, they have a bad rap, right? They think, a lot of people think you do the bare minimum and you do you don't really do great work, and all you're looking for is a quick paycheck. And there are a lot of agents out there in the commercial world, just like residential, that it exists. And it's not, that's the reality of it, is people are just trying to feed their families and trying to make a quick buck. But for me, for instance, the reason why I went off on my own is because instead of making half or 60% of the revenue that I bring in, now I make 100% of it, right? So that allows me to work with less people, first and foremost, which I wanted. And I wanted to dedicate more attention to the people that I work with. And two, it allows me to do what's more important to me, which is giving back. So starting this year, I've been building to a point where starting this year, anyone that I work with, any type of revenue that comes from the transaction, 16% of it is going to go to a charitable cause of either their organization, if they're a nonprofit, so I want to focus on nonprofits moving forward, or they're going to choose a organization on one of the organizations on my list, on my preferred list, that of the causes that I believe in. So,
okay,
doing good work. I went off on a tangent.
No, that's fantastic. I know there's a lot of companies these days that either purposely or not purposely kind of giving back to nonprofits and community type organizations. And so there's these new types of corporations called B corporations and social purpose corporations, which is kind of in the middle between for-profit entities and nonprofits. So this is these are kind of it's a trending move as far as sharing the at least publicly sharing some of the profits. And I think it's win-win for everybody, to get quality representation and to use some of the proceeds to benefit organizations. So yeah, kudos to you on that. Now now do you would talk about tenant reps and mostly in the leasing context, do you also help business owners or investors buy commercial properties?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So these days, what's happened is with interest rates being so low, there more than ever there's a break-even point of what you're spending in rent versus what you'd be paying as a mortgage payment. And so, without getting into too much detail and going over the heads of people who are not in the industry, really what it comes down to is the cash flow. There's a way to make the cash flow of what's going out very similar, but you just have to ask yourself, is the down payment that I'm putting down to buy this commercial building, if the commercial building is for an owner-user purpose, right? You're hosting your company in it. Is it capital that could be used better? So, for instance, $100,000 down payment to buy a building. With that $100,000, if used for marketing, produce a better return on investment, ROI on just trying to market your business, or would that $100,000 be more useful going into the building and essentially making it so that your quote-unquote rent payments aren't being wasted? So there are a lot of people who contacted me to buy smaller buildings for their owner-user purposes. Unfortunately, in Orange County, there's not a lot of condo supply for office space in the 2,000 to 5,000 square foot range. It's very limited. And then industrial is also the same. So there are a lot of people who are interested in buying buildings for their company purposes. There's just not a lot of product out there. Now that's the owner-user world. In terms of investment, I mean, I helped in the last 2 years. I helped a client place roughly a little under $20 million in investment property, and so that's ranging from here to we've done deals in Texas, Arizona, Oregon. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yes.
Yeah, no, you make a good point. Is obviously the first my perception is they think about buying a building when they're kind of the rent's too high, and then they start discussing, well, if we buy a building, what would be our mortgage payment would be. But you make a really good point. Is I don't think a lot of business owners think about it is like for the down payment, can we put into marketing or other things that will generate more revenue for us, and can we get a better better return on it? So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's not a question that most business owners would ask themselves about the use of the money. But when they start having kind of those things on their head, I assume that you are part of just a larger team of buying a building. So what other parts, what other personnel or professionals that a business owner has as putting together a team to purchase a building? Who does he rely on? Other attorneys? Does he have his accountant or bookkeeper or CPA on the books? And then obviously someone like yourself.
Sure. So if I understood your question, I mean, the people they're going to want on your team first and foremost is so let me backtrack. The team members that I see more often than not are their accountant, because every business owner's accountant should be a very, very valuable team member in anything that they do financially related. Their escrow, so escrow agent or office, their loan broker or bank that they trust, a person like myself to represent the transaction, and then any attorney well, I shouldn't say any attorney, but an attorney that they trust to look over the purchase and sales agreement if it's more complicated than not.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually the team that I see. Now, once the transaction is on its way and the building's in escrow, if there's going to be significant tenant improvements or restructuring or redesign of the office, then a good architect and contractor team comes into play. So that's really what I see more often than not. And then if there's going to be, which I've provided many times, if there's going to be an inspection of the building to make sure that it's in good shape where you purchased it, then an inspection company or an inspector, specifically commercial inspector, to inspect the building.
Okay, fantastic. Hey, so we're kind of coming at the end here. Is there anything else that you wanted to share, about your business? Where can we find you? How we can contact you with if we're looking to either get into a new space or even buy a property?
Yeah. So my website, I rebranded last year, and my website's under construction. But you can email me at Brian, BRIAN, at tangram.com, and that's spelled TANGRAM, C as in Charlie, RE as in Edward.com. And number they can reach me at 949-236-4266. And I'm local here in Irvine, California, but I've done deals in the Southern California area as far north as Los Angeles County and as far south as just before downtown San Diego.
Okay, awesome. Hey, Brian, thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I know I learned a lot about, the commercial real estate business, and, hope the listeners got a lot of value out of it too. And when they're ready to reach out to you.
Sweet. Well, you take care of yourself, Dan, and whoever's listening, have a good start to 2020. Good luck.
All right. You.